In my view, one of the most important topics for many businesses who have deployed or are looking to deploy Copilot for Microsoft 365 is how it can be extended. This is a constant topic for questions, and many of those questions come from a place of some misunderstanding of one of the important building blocks of that extensibility toolkit, Copilot Studio. So in this video, I'm going to dig into the issue of extending Copilot for Microsoft 365 using Copilot Studio, considering what types of things it can do, what it can't do that you probably think it can, what it likely will be able to do in the future, and what you should know about other aspects of Copilot for Microsoft 365 extension that live outside of Copilot Studio. First though, a quick introduction. My name is Nick DeCourcy. I'm the owner of Bright Ideas Agency, a digital transformation consulting company focused on the needs of smaller businesses. I'm also the author of Who's in the Copilot Seat, a guidebook for small and medium-sized business leaders on how to adopt AI technology. If you're interested in learning more about working with me or getting a copy of my book, there are links down below in the description. The purpose of Copilot Studio, in my opinion at least, can be a little confusing. At its core, it is mostly a renamed Power Virtual Agents, the Power Platform service that has been around for a good while to allow you to develop chatbot experiences using a visual canvas and low-code approaches. And its capability to create Power Virtual Agents, now just renamed as Copilots, or more clearly referred to as custom Copilots, is still the biggest chunk of its functionality and purpose. On first inspection, it can seem that Copilot Studio is designed as a base for extending Copilot for Microsoft 365, but you'll probably recall that Microsoft breaks these extensibility options down into three different paths: Teams message extensions, graph connectors, and Power Platform based plugins. The only one of these paths you can take with Copilot Studio is the Power Platform plugins path, if you want to create or deploy message extensions or graph connectors, or even just get information about them and how they're being used in your environment. You'll need to use different tools elsewhere in Microsoft 365. So unfortunately, that means that as it stands, there isn't just one place from which you can build or manage all the different extensibility options for Copilot for Microsoft 365. With that said, let's take a look at what you can do in Copilot Studio. As always, all the demos you see in this video are created solely for that purpose, and you never see anyone's private information. To access Copilot Studio, you can head over to copilotstudio.microsoft.com, and confusingly, in my experience at least, it doesn't generally jump directly into the homepage, but into a resource you might have been working on. If this is the case, just hit the Home option. Once in Copilot Studio, you can see two main options here: create a custom Copilot and extend Microsoft Copilot. It's important to be aware that what license you have available will determine exactly what you can do here. Copilot for Microsoft 365 gives certain access to extending workloads, but if you start building a custom Copilot to stand on its own, you're going to need separate licensing in order to deploy it. Within Copilot Studio, there are certain things you can do within the context of both a custom Copilot and extending Microsoft Copilot that, depending on where you do them, will be deployed differently, used differently, and require different licenses. There are also options for integration with other services like AI Builder, which always require add-on licensing. Like everything in Power Platform, the licensing side of this tool can get pretty complicated pretty fast. When you click on Extend Copilot, you're taken to the Extend Microsoft Copilot preview screen, and do bear in mind that this is still in preview. Here you have three options for creating extensions. The Add a Custom GPT option will be coming soon, and Add an OpenAI plugin is live but outside the bounds of this video. For the purposes of this video, we'll be talking about the Add Power Platform Components option. However, I do think it's important for us to pause to consider the options that are on this preview page. First, the fact that custom GPTs are shown here as an option is great. That implies that an upcoming feature is to provide similar functionality to the GPT builder for Copilot Pro that I looked at recently. I'll put a link to that video down in the description. And that would probably offer a much more accessible option than the rest of Copilot Studio for most users. Hopefully though, it doesn't end up being buried several items deep inside Copilot Studio, and it's just accessible from the Microsoft Copilot service as it is for Copilot Pro users. Secondly, it's important that we recognise that when thinking about extending Copilot, we are currently specifically talking about the Microsoft Copilot with graph-grounded chat option available inside Microsoft Teams. That is the only place right now we get the ability to use plugins on commercial accounts. The fact that there is a second tab here for other Copilot experiences leads to questions about what we might see in the future. So clicking on the Add Power Platform Components option, we see 4 additional options: specific topics or conversation, content and insights or prompt, tasks or flow, and data or connector. Let's look at each of these and what scenarios you might want to use them in. Just something to bear in mind here, I'm not covering how to activate plugins in your environment in this video, as I recently made a video that covered that. If you need that information, I'll have a link to it down below. Before we take a look at each of these options, if you're enjoying this video and it's bringing you value, please do hit the like button to help you get in front of a wider audience. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so to see more like this. Let's start with the last option, as this is probably the most straightforward. If you click on Data, you are sent over to the Custom Connectors screen in Power Automate. This is where you build custom connectors that allow you to interact with pretty much any service that has an API, and are the basis for connecting Power Automate or Power Apps to secondary services. Theoretically, you get exactly the same option for extending Copilot. If you head over to make.powerapps.com/Copilot plugins on your Copilot for Microsoft 365 licensed account, you are shown a list of connectors enabled as Copilot plugins, and the ones you select and connect here will be available to you to turn on as plugins in Copilot in Teams. However, right now, no matter how many custom connectors you have in your environment, you're unlikely to see any of them here, as your connector has to be certified as compliant as a Copilot connector before it can appear. And there are some other major caveats, the biggest being that right now your connector has to be read-only to be certified. As an example, we can see the types of queries accepted by the certified Salesforce connector are limited simply to querying Salesforce data. You couldn't, for example, update the status of a lead using a Copilot prompt through the connector as a plugin. This type of write action is currently entirely unsupported. So to summarise, a connector as a plugin will allow you to enable Copilot to take read actions against a certain external data source. Only certified connectors are available. The actions of the connector must be read-only. And this is a suitable solution when you want to enable one or more single-step actions against a certain data source. Next, let's take a look at the tasks or flow option. If you click here, you'll be taken to a new Power Automate flow with a trigger of run a flow from Copilot and a response of respond to Copilot. If you jump into either of these steps, you'll see that they're set up exactly the same as the equivalent for running a flow from Power Apps and then responding back to the app. Now, if you have connectors you already use with Power Platform that you're disappointed you cannot use directly as plugins for Copilot, this is a quick way around that limitation, as you could use your existing connectors here to drive whatever automation you're looking for. I've been looking at flow-based plugins for the last few weeks off and on, and conceptually they work very well. You can even integrate instructions back to Copilot in your responses so that Copilot will present the data in the way you want. However, everything you pass back will be reinterpreted by Copilot, so it's not possible to send back something that's highly formatted or very specific right now. How you describe your flow is extremely important to Copilot being able to understand what it does and use it, and this is the same for all plugins. So you must take the extra time to make sure that's clear, and if you have multiple flows that would appear to do the same thing, that's going to really confuse Copilot. However, there are big issues here too. First, it takes flows literally hours, as much as a day or more, to appear in the list of available flows in Copilot in Teams, and that list is very buggy at times. Sometimes you end up with just multiple copies of the same flow, even though it isn't the actual list of flows that's been published. Secondly, we have another prohibition on write actions, like the example of connectors. I have only been successful in getting Copilot to use flows that are for read actions only. So it would be remiss of me to not highlight again that these are currently preview features, and buried in the documentation of this feature is that all that's supposed to work right now are two demonstrative flow templates you can get from the plugins control page that I showed you in the last example. Both of them are purely read-only flows. We can't expect features marked as preview to function 100%, or what would be the purpose of marking them as preview, so I just wanted to remind you of that. So let's summarise as to why you would use this and how it works. So you'd use a flow if you want Copilot to initiate an action that requires a series of steps, perhaps dealing with multiple data sources or having some kind of error checking routines baked into them. You're happy to publish a plugin that is a single action, in contrast to a connector that can be published with multiple actions baked into it. And right now your need is read-only. I know that extending Copilot is a top priority to find out about for many businesses, both those who have already started deploying Copilot and those who are still on the fence about it. And doing justice to this range of options in just one video is impossible. So to meet this demand, I've decided to try something new. I'm planning my first public live virtual course called simply Get to Know Copilot for Microsoft 365 Extensibility. This 3-hour program will overview the Copilot Extensibility model, look at the 3 different approaches currently available, give examples of use cases, and consider some of the connected issues like adoption and risk management. It's a program designed for leaders wanting to understand the potential of Copilot, but also for technical resources wanting to gain an overview of where they should focus their continued learning on these issues. Right now, I have a pre-registration open on my website, and I plan to offer the program in June and July, giving the opportunity to take in any updates from the upcoming Microsoft Build conference. So if you're interested, please use the link below to let me know. Capacity will be limited to ensure everyone can have a good experience and the opportunity to ask questions along the way. I hope to see you at one of the sessions. Next, let's consider the content and insights or prompt option. If we click here, we're taken over to Power Apps to a different view of our AI plugins. And from here, you can click on Add a Power Platform component as an AI plugin. Then the option you want is Generate Content or Extract Insights. This option uses AI Builder to reason through some sort of prompt input and provide an output. Whereas Copilot operates on the GPT-4 AI model, these prompt plugins operate with GPT 3.5. And like the other options we've looked at here, this isn't a new tool for Copilot. This is reusing an existing capability that allowed you to integrate an AI prompt and response into other Power Platform assets like Power Automate flows. With a prompt plugin, you can define a particular prompt and test it before deploying it as a plugin. This may seem a little redundant given that you'll be calling this plugin from a dialogue with an AI chatbot that's actually working on a better model and with all-you-can-eat consumption, rather than having to consume AI Builder credits as using this will. So what's the purpose of this? Let's take this example of a prompt to extract data from text. This uses a well-established AI Builder capability. I tell the prompt that what I want to extract is a first name, last name, animal and location, and give it the text, Nick DeCourcy took his dog to the park. And you can see that the prompt extracts that data and organises it for me. But I'm not limited to these sorts of templates. I can build on them or create something completely custom. I can customise what I end up with to whatever need I want, which could be a fairly long prompt that I would have to outline every time I used it. If I wanted to do that 10 times each day, then having a prompt plugin like this is going to make life much more efficient for me. In the absence of the end-user changeable Copilot Lab that I think was mentioned prior to release but hasn't turned up yet, This is a neat way to make it easy to access prompts consistently. However, do bear in mind that if the purpose of your prompt plugin closely resembles something Copilot feels it can do on its own, then it's unlikely to call your plugin. Activating a plugin is one thing, but making Copilot use it is sometimes another right now. Do ensure you bear in mind though that AI Builder credits are not included in Copilot for Microsoft 365 licenses, so if you want to use this feature, you'll have to ensure an appropriate amount of credits are assigned. So let's summarise this option. You want to reason over a specific prompt given an input or set of inputs derived from Copilot. Your request works with GPT 3.5. You have access to, or you're willing to buy, AI Builder licensing in addition to your Copilot for Microsoft 365 licenses. You are focused on repeatability, perhaps across multiple control surfaces in Power Platform. Last is the plugin option that will probably be most familiar to those who had a history with Power Virtual Agents prior to the conversion to Copilot Studio. A conversation plugin takes what would have essentially been a PVA topic and allows you to package it up as a plugin for Copilot. When you select this option, it builds out your plugin in Dataverse, much as you might have seen a full PVA bot built out before, and once it's established the correct resources, you can begin authoring your conversational plugin or topic. From the topic authoring canvas, you see something fairly similar to what we saw in Power Automate, an initiation of the plugin from Copilot. It brings in a single variable activity.text, which is the string the user sent to the Copilot related to the plugin initiation, and then you can take further actions. Right now, the list of preview limitations here is fairly long. You can't converse back and forth. It doesn't operate in the context of the authenticated user making the requests. Its responses can only be text-based, and it's either turned on or not in your environment. You cannot determine which Copilot for Microsoft 365 users see the plugin. But the fact that these are called out as preview limitations implies that they will all be resolved though, which makes this a very powerful tool. Outside of those limitations, the options here are just as powerful as creating a bot topic elsewhere. You can access resources to generate answers, make calls to external services, and even initiate Power Automate flows. In fact, a lot of the capabilities in the other three options we've already looked at live here too, albeit currently with a different setup related to user authentication. Since I started to make this video, I've had a generative AI option pop up here too, which adds in the option you get in custom copilots to reference an external source like a document to give answers. But this, again, is a premium feature now tied to Copilot Studio, previously Power Virtual Agents licensing. Once you've created a topic and published the plugin, it'll appear under the Copilot Studio list of plugins in your Copilot for Microsoft 365 chat in Teams. So for this option, think about, you want features also available in custom copilots like generative answers. You're willing to deploy features that may also need dedicated Copilot Studio licensing. You can set up your plugin as a single request per topic. And the preview limitations such as authentication are clear. So we've covered a lot in this video. The biggest takeaway I want to express to you is that for all the features we've looked at in detail here, Microsoft really means it when they say they are in preview. I think we're very used to getting our hands on preview products that in big substantive ways work exactly the same as the final product, and for all but the most edge use cases, there is little more than theoretical risk in using the preview for any workload. That, in my opinion, is definitely not the case here. This set of products seems to be under really active development by Microsoft. There regularly seem to be small changes to them, and even bigger changes to the documentation. Often the documentation doesn't align with the product you see live, and for each of the options we looked at, there are really big caveats around their use that you must understand before trying to use them. The tools are somewhat buggy, they don't tend to work as you'd expect, and you can waste hours achieving very little grappling with these challenges. But for those of us excited by these upcoming features, it still makes a lot of sense to explore them. If you're in the situation that you're using Copilot for Microsoft 365 today and you must extend it, then my recommendation for right now is that either Teams message extensions or graph connectors should be your path. However, if you're just starting to roll out Copilot and you're looking for a path that will allow you to extend it in the future, knowing about the tools available in Copilot Studio makes a huge amount of sense. My assumption is that many of the big limitations we see here will clear up over time. The biggest one being the potential to build plugins that could write back to data sources. Buried in the documentation, it's implied that, for example, eventually we'll be able to push adaptive cards into the chat in the same way we can from Teams message extensions, or currently from Power Automate using Teams-based flows. I think it would be surprising if Microsoft doesn't allow more active writing to data sources and to the chat in the future, but I'm assuming that right now, working out how to do that in a way that assures safety is proving to be a big challenge. There are two big concerns I have about Microsoft's Copilot extensibility path though. First is the cost and license creep. This is another surface through which Microsoft has graciously turned on for all users with Copilot licenses the opportunity for trying out additional premium features that have the potential to cost their businesses a lot of money. Based on what's available in Copilot Studio, the claim that it's just included with your Copilot for Microsoft 365 purchase is a little disingenuous in my opinion. The other connected issue here is timelines. These tools we've looked at today are far from ready for prime time, and other options such as message extensions or graph connectors aren't a great fit for many use cases. We're now deep into the first year of many enterprises having access to Copilot, and a full quarter has passed since the first smaller businesses got the same. And more what I hear from clients is that Copilot for Microsoft 365 is okay, but they feel really limited by the fact it isn't talking to X data source or Y system that they really depend on for their work. I'm concerned that as time goes on and these features languish in preview, Microsoft starts to lose the first mover advantage, and the renewal windows on those 12-month Copilot for Microsoft 365 subscriptions come closer and closer every day. This is why, in my opinion, Microsoft should be throwing every benefit they can afford to those Copilot for Microsoft 365 licensed users to ensure their businesses resubscribe at the end of their first year. The biggest differentiator Microsoft has to assure that long-term lock-in to the Copilot ecosystem are these extensibility paths, and right now, at least a third of that offer is a wonderful view to the future, but little more than that. On the flip side, despite the issues I've outlined, Microsoft is significantly further along this path than any other equivalent vendor, and how Copilot will work within the broader Microsoft ecosystem is fairly clear if a little rough around the edges in places. The complexity of this offer is a reflection of the breadth of what Microsoft can provide its customers, and while some of this offer might cost a little more than the base licenses you've already bought, there simply isn't a solution that's equivalent from vendors like Google or OpenAI. Right now, in fairly substantive ways, if you want a flexible, extendable, integrated AI tool, and you don't want to go back to the drawing board to build your own from scratch on top of an LLM, Copilot is the only game in town. What do you think about these extensibility options and where they are right now? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching through to the end. Until the next video, bye bye.